To me, investing is just taking the tactics and plugging in your little different investments to kind of support your strategy. So I don't get too hung up on all the details of the particulars of the investment. You've got to have the strategy nailed first, and that creates the ultimate impact.
You're listening to the Real Returns podcast, where we learn how real investments can make a real impact. Join your hosts, Andrew and Dan, as they share stories and interview business leaders on how real estate and other forms of investment can create meaningful change for individuals and communities around the world.
I'm really excited for our guest today, Dave Wolcott, who is the founder and CEO of Pantheon Investments. Dave is actually previously a captain in the Marine Corps. He is a father of triplets and all-around interesting guy, and he's doing some awesome things in the world of investing. So Dave, welcome to the Real Returns Show. Why don't you tell our guests a little bit about yourself and your story?
Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Andrew. Grateful to be here. Well, I grew up in a middle-class family in Connecticut, and like probably, most people, I was told that the recipe for success was to go to school, get good grades, and life would just work out, right? So I followed down that path. I went to school actually at GW, close to you in Virginia, Dan, did the ROTC program and got into the Marine Corps. And, it was a phenomenal experience. I got to serve my country, travel the world, work with some great people. And I learned some things in the Marine Corps they don't teach you really anywhere else. Things such as leadership, teamwork, and integrity. After the Marines, I transitioned into corporate America, got into the tech industry, and I quickly became frustrated with the bureaucracy and the corporate machine and really losing that sense of purpose and mission that I really had in the Marines that drove me. And about the same time, my wife and I started raising a family. We had an 18-month-old running around. We were trying to figure out, this new thing of parenthood. And then on October 24th, 2000, my wife and I literally welcomed triplets into the world. So we quadrupled the size of our family. And I can tell you, Dan, Andrew, the first thing that was going through my head was like, how am I going to provide for financial security for my family? Because my family is everything. And now you just took the goalposts and moved them way down the field, right? So the first thing I did was I went to see my financial planner. And, he told me the same thing that every other one told me, which was, oh, you've got kids? No problem. You can invest in these vehicles called 529 plans. Just max out your 401k, dollar cost average, you're going to do fine, right? And I immediately became really dismayed with that type of advice. And I knew that the top 1% were not building their wealth as retail investors in the stock market. So I launched this obsessive journey to figure out how the top 1% were actually building wealth. So then I proceeded to invest in all kinds of alternative assets, everything from raw land to retail to office to single family, multifamily, oil and gas. Fast forward 20 years, had all of this investment experience and knowledge, as well as being an entrepreneur. And I really wanted to help other people learn this blueprint for building wealth outside of Wall Street and what does that really look like. So that's what Pantheon is today, where we help people with deal flow. We help people create more freedom in their lives by understanding, what does investing actually mean to them, right? And how can they drive, more freedom in their life.
Wow, that's amazing. And when you think of freedom, what freedoms do you think of? Like, is it financial freedom? Is it beyond that?
Yeah, so it's such a great question, Andrew, right? I think oftentimes we hear the buzzword of financial freedom, right? But we don't do any deeper thinking. We kind of stop there. If I could just have freedom to, get out of this job, or if my wife could stop working. But what does that really mean? So I encourage people to actually start to unpack and keep asking, the whys. Dan Sullivan, as we know, has a great set of, definition around the 4 freedoms, which he calls, not only freedom of money to always be creating a future that's bigger than your past, but also having freedom of purpose. So you wake up every day being fascinated and motivated by the work that you're doing. It's also about creating freedom of relationships to choose who you want to spend your time working with, your partners, your clients, your family, your friends. Freedom of time is also super important as well, right? Because it's the one thing we can't actually buy is time. It's in limited quantity. So how are you spending your time, right? So I think these four freedoms, and I would throw in freedom of location is important as well. But having those freedoms in your life can really lead to such more of an extraordinary life and just, living life to your full potential.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Do you find that early in your career, you were focused on maybe one of those freedoms, maybe not all of them? Do you find your clients tend to put disproportionate emphasis on one of them? What do you find most often?
I think people basically think about it as financial freedom, but they haven't gone as far as defining what that really means to them. So in my book, The Holistic Wealth Strategy, one of the first things we do in our framework is we talk to clients about creating their wealth vision. As entrepreneurs, that's one of the first things you do in your business is you create a vision. You create a mission statement. You have values to support that. Well, family offices do this, but oftentimes investors don't really spend the time to create that vision. And to give another kind of sporting analogy, right? It's if you don't have a target, you're going to miss every time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's a great analogy there. And I know in my career early on, I didn't have that target. And so, I didn't really know what I was chasing after. And so one of the things we love to talk about on this podcast is the impact of our investments and kind of the impact of our capital. I'm curious how you think of that for your business. One of the things you've already mentioned is, hey, financial freedom and wealth can actually help us to also have those other freedoms that you mentioned, freedom of time and relationships and location. What does it look like for your business as you think of deploying capital?
Yeah, so I come at this a little bit differently, right? I mean, I think the first thing that comes to mind people will talk about is, maybe some type of philanthropic type investing or having some kind of social impact with your investments. But we just got back from our mastermind annual event that we hosted here in Sarasota, Florida. And I just can't even begin to tell you the magical experience we had of bringing all these investors in. We had workshops, we had guest speakers, and it was all focused on creating that wealth vision, creating that ideal life that people are really looking for. And again, trying to understand, what those freedoms are. And that's different for everyone. Again, some people might want to, spend more time with their kids, right? And creating freedom of time, right? To spend more time as their kids are growing up. Maybe someone is driving a charity, right? Or wants to create a charitable foundation and kind of create some impact that way, but they need resources to be able to do that. So I think everyone has their own way of how they're kind of creating impact and living their ideal lives. But when we can start to take money out of the equation and just say, okay, if I said you've got $1 million in passive income tomorrow, how would that change your life? What would you be doing? Where would you be? And who would you be with? And I'll tell you, when you can really start to get clarity on what that looks like for you, I mean, the impact that you're going to create is you're going to be a much better father. You're going to be a much better spouse. You're going to be a much better friend, maybe a brother. One of my goals is to be world class in all of those categories. So every month, every quarter, I'm looking at my goals. Like, am I actually being a world-class brother to my sister and brother? How about to my parents, right? So in my way and my special way, I'm creating impact for all of those people that I can touch. And also from an impact standpoint, the more people I can help gain clarity in terms of their vision, what that looks like, how they can, to me, investing is just taking the tactics and plugging in your little different investments to kind of support your strategy. So I don't get too hung up on all the details of the particulars of the investment. You've got to have the strategy nailed first, and that creates the ultimate impact.
Dave, that is a fascinating perspective to me. Can you give us just a little bit more, a little teaser for our audience? What is the substance of the holistic wealth strategy? How do you recommend people start to sort of work this through for themselves to get to clarity on answering some of these questions that you're bringing up?
Yeah, sure, Dan. I mean, I went through this process myself, right? And it took me 20 years to really even be able to kind of define it and articulate it. And what I wanted to do was actually create a framework for people so other people could follow this, but it's not so rigid, right? It's got enough flexibility that it, can support you wherever you are in the journey, but it has 5 distinct phases that you can, go through during the process. The first one, we already talked about creating your vision, right? That's the underpinning. So you have a North Star of this. The first phase is all about mindset, right? Because so many of us, I mean, like I said in the beginning, I came from a middle-class family. I had all kinds of limiting beliefs. And a lot of that was, my parents were from a different generation. It was, frankly, it was scarcity mindset. So to cross the chasm into having an abundance mindset, that took a lot of work and self-development to actually get there. So I think we all have these limiting beliefs that are really holding us back, right? So you really need to focus on your mindset, creating a growth mindset, creating a mindset of abundance. There's also, just think about your goals and your habits to support those goals. Are those taking you closer to your wealth vision or actually pulling you away from your vision, right? And here's another sports analogy for you, right? With our, Jim Rohn, right? He famously said, you're the average of the 5 people you spend most of your time with. So are those people taking you closer to your vision? In most cases, I think a lot of us have, let's say, legacy friends that we've actually outgrown, but we still spend time with them and they're kind of like crabs on a bucket, so we can't move forward, right? Mm-hmm. But you can actually create more impact by creating a better level of growth connections that you have. So mindset is really everything. It starts with mindset. If you don't have the right mindset, you're not even going to be open-minded to say, hey, let's look at this opportunity that Burgo has, because the financial planner is going to tell you it's too risky, it's not institutional. And from their perspective, it is because they can't sell it to you, right? So it's alternative. And so they're going to say all these things are risky. But what I can tell you is I spend my time with ultra high net worth family offices, the 1/10 of the 1%. This is how they invest. This is the game that they play, right? So which game do you want to play in, right? But you've got to start with mindset. That's crucial.
Yeah, I love that. Starting with mindset is one of those things that's just easier said than done. We tend to, for whatever reason, have things just come in and hijack our brain all the time. So I know it's something I'm always working on. I'm curious. I mean, Dan and I are both investors personally. We obviously run an investment company, so we're pretty interested in investments in general. How do you think of either your portfolio or your client's portfolio from an investment standpoint? Are you, heavier on alternatives than the typical financial advisor might recommend? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, for sure. So we have an investment thesis, right? And this kind of gets into phase 5, actually, of the holistic wealth strategy, which is building massive passive income. Phase 4 is actually optimizing your portfolio. So the majority of Americans today have their wealth tied up in 2 places. It's in trapped equity in their primary residence, or it's in government-sponsored qualified plans like 401ks and IRAs, where the government is telling you how much you're going to be able to take out, when you can take it out, how much the taxes are going to be. So optimizing that portfolio is ideal. Now, from an investment thesis standpoint, I see too many operators, too many deals. Once you get into this space, everyone says, hey, that's a good deal. That's a good deal. I invest in that. And they have no actual strategy. Well, we focus on 3 sectors. We focus on real estate, energy, and private credit and private debt. Why do we do that? Because number one, there's really strong macroeconomic fundamentals where everyone needs energy in the world, no matter what industry you're in, it's recession resistant. Real estate, right? Same thing, strong macroeconomic fundamentals where there's a shortage of housing, right? So finding kind of good deals there. And on the credit and debt side, right, you've got your fixed income component where you can reliably bring in income for your thing. So we are now looking for a three-dimensional type return where you can get tax efficiency, you can get passive income, and you can also drive forced appreciation, right? So for instance, if you're a high income earner, we'll invest in oil and gas because you can offset 100% of your income, active income, against that investment, right? So that is really huge, right? Plus you can drive passive income through that. Plus you can drive some appreciation gains. So, we're looking at things like that. And again, depending upon, your current situation. If you have high W-2 income, that's a great situation. We have other people, let's say you're younger. I mean, we just put together an amazing new development building that we worked on with a family office and a developer that has substantial, it's a 3.5x return in 4 years for a really unique condo product, one of a kind, that's, build to rent type model in Southern Florida. So that's super unique, right? If you're trying to move the needle in terms of appreciation. So we're always kind of looking for a mix of these things and looking for that three-dimensional return. And then I would juxtapose this against your typical stock planner because number one, it's a one-dimensional return. So if you have $1,000 worth of Tesla stock, the only thing you're hoping for is what? It's going to go up in value, right? So you can only win one way, and the cards are completely stacked against you. But all the while, they're telling you to create this 60-40 type of portfolio split that doesn't make sense. If you look at Tiger 21's portfolio allocation, right? I had Michael Sonnenfeld on my show a few months ago. He shared his portfolio allocation, and they only have 20 to 22% exposure to public equities. And this is the 1/10 of the 1% of the investors. So what does that tell you?
So do you recommend any exposure to public equities, or like you mentioned those three main categories? If I were one of your clients, could I do a third, and a third, or would you say, oh no, you've got to be a little bit more diversified than that?
Yeah, I think of it in different buckets, right? And another key, the real estate's a big bucket, private equity is a big bucket. And again, then you have more of a focus on, if you can focus on a particular sector, you get smarter and smarter on that sector. And then you also get better deal flow, right? Because kind of people know who you are. You keep defining your buy box and your strike zone. So you keep getting better and better at the deals that you're looking for, just like you guys are doing right at Burgo. But I see some of these other operators, one day they're offering a car wash. The next day they're going after, some other alternative thing. Like you can't get better at something if you're being a jack of all trades. And another, key bucket that I think is so often underlooked, and why we decided to actually get licensed in this and help clients with it, is something called infinite banking, right? Where it's a cash value whole life insurance policy where you're taking something that's very uncertain, which is what's happening in the financial economy, and you're creating certainty of it. So, you're taking a portion of your portfolio, you put it into this cash value life insurance policy, which has a guaranteed dividend. It's growing completely tax-free. You can create a tax-free income stream from it. You have asset protection to it. You can pass it to your heirs completely tax-free and avoid probate. And the best part is you can borrow against it to create leverage and liquidity to invest in another opportunity, to invest in your kids' education. So this is a complete multiplier, and the ultra wealthy do this really well. They take $1 and they see how many jobs can I get done for that at the same time.
Wow. David, it's a really fascinating framework. I don't hear many people in your space that take such an independent thought approach to both the actual tactical element of how we deploy capital, but also the philosophical, what are we actually trying to achieve here? And what do we mean when we talk about freedom? It is a buzzword in the financial investing space, is this concept of financial freedom. But I really appreciate that holistic perspective. I am going to ask you a few questions now in our lightning round that'll hopefully let us get to know a little bit of a different side of you. So, first step, what would you say, personal, professional, take it any direction you want, what's your biggest win?
My biggest win is really investing in myself and, making that shift to say that I am my greatest asset. So constantly investing in my health, my relationships, my development, my education, all of those things is always that's the biggest win for me as well as the biggest ROI.
And if I can just go a little bit deeper on that one, what led to that shift? Was there an event or a moment in time where you recognized that I'm going to double down on investing in myself?
Yeah, I think it's really been an evolutionary process, Dan, really kind of working through, just constant learning, always leveling up with different mastermind groups, things that, I've joined, Strategic Coach, we've talked about, right, with Andrew. So just this evolutionary process of really learning and then kind of understanding that, and then trying to get into this habit of actually quantifying things, right? So once again, when you have clarity on what your vision is, then you can start to measure it and say, hey, am I getting closer to that? And what I find that's actually amazing too is sometimes, again, we talk about this word of, financial freedom, right? It's this big word, but when I sit down and I'm journaling in a great frame of mind, I might write down that, my parents are really getting older now. And it's like this whole new dynamic. So what do I want to do? I want to be able to spend more time with them. It's just that simple. So now I'm intentional about it and I set aside time to do that. And it doesn't really cost me anything outside of, travel, but it was becoming intentional about doing that.
Thanks for the sidebar on the lightning round there. That was helpful. What's your favorite movie?
Well, throw some humor in here. I always loved Mel Brooks's History of the World. It was one of the classics.
Okay. I don't know that one, so I have to put it on my radar. How about a favorite food?
Favorite food? How about Bronzino?
Oh, great call.
Do you do the whole fish fried with the head on and everything?
Well, I wouldn't fry it, but baked, in Italy, just you have it baked served with some side of potatoes and olive oil and olives, and it's, fantastic.
Sounds phenomenal. What's a current growth edge for you these days? It sounds like there are a lot because of how much you're investing in yourself, but if you had to pick one area where you're really focused on trying to become better personally or professionally, what would you call out?
Health. I would say health. So I'm 54 right now. My biological age is actually 10 years younger. So I'm constantly trying to work on bringing that number down through things that I'm investing in with my health, biohacking, exercise, all kinds of things. I actually just completed stem cell injections about 5 weeks ago in my knees. I've done Ironman and some marathons in the past that in my Marine days have kind of caught up to me, and had 2 surgeries in my knees. And I got to tell you, after 5 weeks, it's just unbelievable. The cartilage is literally regrowing in my knees and the pain is going away. I'm cycling again. And it's phenomenal. Yeah.
Good for you. That's so cool to hear. Congratulations on that.
Yeah.
And lastly, how about some A+ content that you're taking in these days? Blogs, podcasts, books?
Sure. Here's an awesome book just started reading recently, especially if you're an entrepreneur. It's called Buy Back Your Time by Dan Martell. And so he's a SaaS entrepreneur, but has a, really cool framework around, how to structure your time, because that's the one thing that we have, right, that's so limited. And I think we're all guilty of, not truly optimizing, our time in a day. So great book.
Awesome. Well, thanks for that recommendation, Dave. I'll have to take that into account. Lastly, how can our folks find you if they want to? You have a podcast, so tell us about that, or where can they learn more about you and the work you do?
Sure. So actually, and this is actually part of our impact investing too, if you go to holisticwealthstrategy.com, you can get a free copy of our book. But if you do get it on Amazon, all of the proceeds are actually going to thefund.org, which is our veteran charity. So that's the charitable work that we're actually driving with some of our impact that we're creating. But holisticwealthstrategy.com, you can get a free copy of the book and check that out. Or on our podcast is Wealth Strategy Secrets of the Ultra Wealthy.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Dave. Loved hearing about how you think of wealth holistically, as the program is named, and really just enjoyed thinking about the freedoms more holistically as well. So freedom of money, purpose, time, relationships, and you added location in there as well. Money and wealth, are really just a means to an end. And that really, those freedoms are what a lot of people think about as the end. So thanks so much really for being on the show and for sharing a bit of your wisdom.
You bet. Really great to connect. Appreciate it, the opportunity.
Thanks.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Real Returns Podcast. We hope that you learned something new about how you can invest to make a lasting impact on those around you. Please be sure to subscribe to our show wherever you listen to your podcasts, leave us a review, and share about us on social media. We hope you will join us for our next episode, where we will be continuing the conversation around impactful real estate investing.